Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Bore da chi, croeso mawr chi eto bore yma, braf cael eich cwmni chi. My name is John Parry-Jones, and I'm the business manager here at Cardiff Business School, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our breakfast briefing this morning. I'm delighted this morning that we're able to welcome Julie Ann Haines, who is the CEO of Principality Building Society. Julie Ann, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's been a challenging year for us all, and it's nice to be able to end our season of breakfast briefings with something slightly less formal and probably just a nice way to end the season. Like I say, it's been a hard year for us all, so thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before I hand over, there are just a few fundamentals I need to just go through with you. Just a reminder that speech to text captioning is available to you this morning. If you click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen at the moment and then click on the show subtitles, it will enable you to follow the discussion this morning via the captioning service which is available. So we hope that you're able to enjoy those. Again, a heads up for our briefings that have been lined up for the autumn. It's taken shape, the programme for the autumn has taken shape. In September, we're looking forward to welcoming Derek Walker from the Wales Cooperative Centre, who's going to present to us details on the employee ownership. Employee ownership has doubled during the course of the last 5 years, and Derek is going to take us through that process. In the company, we're delighted to be able to welcome as well David Sproxon, co-founder of Aardman Animations, who is going to give his first-hand experience of how that process worked for Aardman as they went through the transfer to employee ownership. So we're really looking forward to that one. Then in October, we're looking forward to welcoming Professor John Harrington. John is the director of DTP Wales, that's the Doctoral Training Partnership. And he's going to present details to you of how you may be able to benefit from postgraduate studentships and get potentially PhD students to come and work for your organisation. So again, some great opportunities for you to collaborate with us there. So again, it's one to note in the diary. And then in November, we are looking forward as well to welcoming Jakob Schneebacher from the Office of National Statistics, who is going to discuss the survey that's been carried out, which was developed to measure management practices across all organisations, specifically relating to turnover, profitability and productivity. So there are going to be some great numbers and figures that Jakob is going to be able to present to us then. So again, a really worthwhile session to look forward to. You may have noticed if you've been following these briefings, the autumn briefings, we had planned to run a session with Professor Kate Daunt on misinformation, in particular in relation to COVID. That session will still happen, but we've pushed it back into January of next year because there was some data that Kate wanted to be able to present that wasn't going to be available until then. So that one will happen, but it will be in the new year. Again, a quick plug for our Lean Six Sigma program, always a popular program with Professor Manish Kumar. Our yellow belt is lined up for September of this year, and the green belt is in November. These are both going to be online courses. So again, if you've got any interest, if you just want to make some general inquiries about the program, what it entails and so forth, then please do get in touch with us and we can give you all the information that you may need. Also, just a heads up in relation to the government's Help to Grow programme. This is a programme for small and medium-sized enterprises. It's primarily government funded. You may know all about it. I think the government are funding about 90% of this 12-week programme. It's an intense 12-week programme, but it's designed to help you and the small businesses learn new skills, to reach out to new customers, and obviously, ultimately, hopefully, to boost profits as well. So it's potentially a really important programme that all business schools throughout the UK are going to be involved in, and we are certainly hoping to be a part of that in the autumn. So there's a link there to the government's website, so follow that. If you haven't read about it yet, then the details will be there. We also have our executive MBA, which is starting in September. Sarah, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself very quickly just to update or to give some feedback or some details on the exec MBA.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Yeah, we're still recruiting. Starts 14th of September induction. So if you're interested in studying a programme at a top business school, it's designed to fit in with work. So they're delivered in 3-day chunks. strategic management, leadership, operations management, marketing. You'll get these deep dives into different topic areas, culminating in a dissertation at the end of the programme. So we've got lots of people on the programme already, so it should be a really lovely cohort full of different types of people from different sectors. If that's something that's of interest, then drop me a line as a programme director and I can talk you through it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Okay, well, just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded this morning, just so that you're aware. Please be aware of that. As always, if you'd like to pose any questions to Julie Ann, then the Q&A box is at the bottom. Please do that. Today is supposed to be an interactive session. We really want to find out more about Julie Ann and how the past 12 months in particular have worked for her and for her colleagues at the Principality. So please do pop your questions in the Q&A box and we'll put them to her. I say we'll put them to her, which is not actually true, because you'll be aware that this is the point at which I tend to take a step back. So I'm very grateful this morning to Dr. Eleri Rosier, who's going to chair the next session of this briefing. So thanks for that, Eleri. Diolch yn fawr, draw at y ti.
Diolch, John. Thank you, John. Good morning to you all. Bore da I chi gyd. It's great to see so many of you joining us this morning. So as John said, I'm Eleri Rosier and I'm a reader in marketing and strategy at the business school. There we are, I'm unmuted now, I think. So my role today is to chair the session. So thank you very much for inviting me to come and do that, but also to pose any questions that you have. So please don't be shy. As John said, use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and I'll be able to pose those questions for you. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to Julie Ann Haines, the CEO of Principality Building Society. So Julie Ann has more than 20 years experience in retail and financial services. And before she became CEO, was Principality's Chief Customer Officer. And she was responsible for all aspects of customer service. But in September last year, Julie Ann became the first female CEO in the Building Society's history, taking on the role right slap bang in the middle of a pandemic and probably during one of the greatest economic challenges ever faced in this country. So, Julie Ann, can I start off then by giving you a very warm welcome and asking you first of all then, what has been the greatest challenge for you in the last year, both at Principality and also maybe for yourself on a more personal level?
Well, I think when you look back, there's been some incredible highs and lows, and that's both professionally and personally. So there's been some days and experiences of deep joy, you know, spending time with my kids at home, having lunch with them when they should normally be at school and I should be in the office, just trying to make the best of the situation and trying to make it as fun. You know, those are memories that, you know, you'll always treasure. But inevitably, there have been some really dark days as well, both personally. And I mean, I'm not alone. I'm sure there'll be many people on the call who've, you know, they've experienced loss over the last 18 months. They've had to deal with that remotely and not be able to go through the usual sort of, you know, rituals of supporting family and visiting ill people. And those things, you know, I think have a lasting impact on us all. But hopefully we learn from those and we spend time sort of reflecting on those. So if I brought it to Principality, I mean, I think the initial first few weeks of moving into lockdown, you know, the immediate focus is on trying to protect colleagues. And, you know, for me, that was, you know, making sure we were doing all of the very best that we could. And you know, incredibly grateful to so many people at Principality who really went above and beyond. We mobilised 800 colleagues working from home within a few days. You know, with all of the sort of tech working, we had no downtime whatsoever. It was we didn't miss a beat really. And you know, also just thinking about things like PPE. I mean, I can remember conversations thinking I can't get my head around the fact that we're sitting here talking about how do we protect our branch-based colleagues who, you know, we'd had a letter from the Treasury saying it's really important you keep open and make sure that vulnerable people still have access to cash and basic services if they need it. So that's real protection piece for me at the beginning was clearly so challenging. And just dealing with the uncertainty of the whole situation. So, there's been a huge number of challenges over the 18 months. I think there's been different phases of the pandemic for everybody. Organisationally, what will this mean? What does this mean for our strategy? Making some big calls about continuing to invest and trying to see through it. And we're very fortunate working in financial services that, our sort of sales, our turnover wasn't impacted the way so many other businesses and categories have been, whether that be hospitality, retail. So I take, so much, from that really. So yeah, real highs and lows, Hilary, and, real dark times where as an exec team and then becoming a new CEO, you're having to dig deep really to have the resilience and the mental strength to continue to lead the organisation. But as they always say, you learn so much in periods of adversity, and I'm a big believer in that, and do feel we are a much stronger organisation. We are stronger leaders because of the experience over the last 18 months.
So what do you think the Principality has done particularly well in the last year? And what are you most proud of?
I mean, I've talked a little bit about it. We've seen our colleague engagement scores go up quite significantly over the past 18 months, and that has not abated. We've maintained and even, continue to build on that. It's absolutely prompted us to really challenge ourselves around what we expect from colleagues and how we really get the balance between what's important to colleagues and what's important to our organisation. We thought we were really good at that, actually. And actually we were. We were featuring in the top, 20 organisations in the Great Place to Work survey. But I think what we've truly done is really put ourselves into the shoes of our colleagues. Many of us have, at a senior level, have had children being homeschooled. I mean, I've got, my children self-isolating this week. So, there might be some feet coming in as we're doing this whilst I'm in the kitchen. But I think we've truly listened to what's really important. And the same is true of members. So in the very, very early days when the government hadn't really announced things like the furlough scheme, clearly our major concern was whether customers would be able to continue to pay their mortgages. What would this mean from an unemployment perspective? And so what we saw was a huge desire from colleagues to really support customers through these very difficult days. And we saw huge amounts of phone calls and demand coming in. And, I'm really proud of how all of our colleagues really rallied to make sure we could still maintain not only providing that basic reassurance, giving payment holidays, but actually still providing great customer service. And, overall, we saw a very small decrease in our Net Promoter Score, but we're still winning awards. We still have a Net Promoter Score in the 80s, and I'm incredibly proud of that. And so, whilst clearly as a CEO, you spend lots of time talking about capital, financial performance, turnover, margin, all of those things, I think ultimately being able to say we've come out of this a better connected organisation with our members, with our communities, and also with our colleagues, I think, I'm exceptionally proud of.
So you've mentioned helping your staff and colleagues to cope with home working and furlough scheme. So navigating your organisation through this period has obviously meant trying to help your staff and your members to adapt to this new normal, as they're calling it. So are there any processes that you've enacted to ensure that your company continues to grow and to develop, but in a safe way, keeping everybody kind of safe and well?
Yeah, so one of the things we had done over the previous few years was invest in technology, simple things like ensuring that all of our branches, so we've got 53 branches and 18 agencies across Wales and the borders, and we'd invested in making sure that we had similar technology in branches that maybe some of our head office servicing functions have meant. So, what we've been able to do through the course of the pandemic is say, well, when footfall has been lower in our branches and we haven't seen people coming into branch because of lockdowns, that we've actually been able to move work from what's traditionally been head office functions out to our branches and really make sure, therefore, that colleagues in branches, not only are they being productive, but they're actually feeling like they're contributing to the shared challenges of the organisation. And those are things that we will continue to do. And that's meaning that we're more efficient and effective. We're being able to meet the demand much more quickly. And that's something that will stay with us forever. We're also in the sort of throes of a major IT transformation and delivering new sort of digital sort of channels for members. So that was really well timed. We actually went live with all of our new savings platform, digital platform, literally 2 weeks before we went into lockdown 1. That was a big relief to kind of get it out the door, and it was the 2 years of effort, but that's meant that we've actually been able to grow our savings customer base and really focus on growth by utilising that digital. And that's been in Wales, but also across the UK. So if we hadn't been in that position, then clearly how we would have funded our business and how we would have grown our business, we would have had to have worked incredibly hard. So continue to invest with that technology implementation is really, really important. And we've got about 9 months more work to do to finish replatforming across all of our major product areas. And then the other thing was clearly when we initially went into lockdown, really thinking about how do we make this as easy as we can for customers and colleagues, and what are the sort of custom practices that we've had that really don't add a lot of value. They may make us feel better from a risk and compliance perspective, but are they genuinely adding value? And is this an opportunity, therefore, to really, to streamline? And what's been brilliant is that we've maintained with that. We haven't gone back to some of the old ways of doing things. We've absolutely grabbed it and said, if we've been able to cope through lockdowns in this kind of posture, then how do we do that going forward? And so that's meant that, from a customer experience perspective, from a colleague experience, that, we're really, really being able to continue to look for ways to improve and be more efficient and effective as an organisation as well.
So we're at a bit of a tricky stage now in the pandemic, and many businesses are trying to transition from that home working to a safe return to the office. What's your approach to this, especially as you've mentioned some of your high street branches have been, even before the pandemic, experiencing kind of reduced footfall. So how are you going to kind of manage this transition?
Yeah, I mean, we remain fully committed to our high streets. The majority of branches their footfall has recovered as we've come out of the latest lockdown. It's still not quite back up to where it was, and it may never do. But as a mutual-based organisation, the big voice that we hear from our membership is that they still want access to branches. They still want to be able to walk in and get, a conversation with somebody and to help them think about what they need from us. So we absolutely remain committed, and I've got no plans that whilst members continue to use our branches, then we will still have that position. But if I move to our head office, we're in the slightly unusual position. We've got a head office in the centre of Cardiff. We own the building. We've been there over 30 years, and we'd always known that there was going to need to be quite a significant refurbishment of the building. And I'm not talking paint and carpet. I'm talking back to kind of concrete, lots of new electrics, heating and ventilation. And so really the discussion, at my first board meeting was, let's just crack on and get on with that, because who knows what the future looks like in terms of future lockdowns. So we're in the middle of a multi-million-pound investment into that building, and we remain committed to having our head office in the centre of Cardiff, because we recognise that there are times when colleagues do want to come together, they do want to collaborate, they want to have those kind of conversations with each other, those one-to-ones, those strategy days. But that really means that we're going to be out of our building for longer than maybe we'd normally be if we weren't doing this investment programme. But our whole approach really is, we'll do what our colleagues want us to do. When we survey them, 50% of them say that actually they're really happy to be at home full time, and they would only want to pop into the office for very sort of one-off type things, a strategy day, a planning day, a year-end review. And then about 10% of people are saying, no, I want to be back in the office full time. And those are the people where we've maybe put in place the opportunity for them to come into head office a little bit more. They could be living alone. They may have mental health challenges. And then the remaining percentage are saying, we want the flexibility to come in and work when it suits us for certain things, but we also want the flexibility to work from home. So I'm not minded. We haven't made a final decision, but I'm certainly not minded to say you've got to be in the office 2 days a week. I know some local employers have done that. I'm probably not in that place. I think we truly have to trust and empower colleagues that they'll know when the right time to come into office is. There will be meetings where we may ask them to come in, of course, but ultimately, this should be about capitalising on the fact we have been able to successfully run our business over the past 18 months with 10 people out of 800 odd being in our head office. So if that's our starting principle, then that's the way I'd like to move forward.
So on that note, we've had a question through the Q&A from Jonathan Morris. What are the longer term implications for hybrid working arrangements? And what were the positive and negative lessons of this, for example, on communications or employee welfare?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think longer term, you do think, well, how do you create those opportunities where you can bring everybody together and celebrate that sort of that uniqueness of what it means to work in an organization? So I think you have to work harder at that. Inevitably, I'm not imagining that we will have 8 floors of desks the way we used to. I'm imagining a space whereby it's much more about collaboration spaces. And clearly, until we get clarity on social distancing, our view at the moment is we will absolutely need all of the space that we've currently got to house colleagues, even if, they're working 2 to 3 days a week from home. But longer term, there clearly would be opportunities, I'm sure, for many organisations to release space. And again, for us, we own the building, we've got options there in the very long term, but certainly our whole approach for the next sort of 3 years is that we will need the space that we need. In terms of lessons, we haven't seen, like most organisations, we've seen sickness plummet. We're not getting the sort of the daily, the coughs and colds, I just don't have the energy to commute in from wherever I live to head office. So we've absolutely seen that plummet. We've seen, as I say, engagement go up. We've seen the scores around well-being increase. So I think it's about challenging ourselves that even in the long term, it is possible to build and sustain competitive advantage in a hybrid model. And that you just need to put so much time and energy and effort into thinking through your communication strategy, your whole approach, how we as leaders show up, how we become and remain visible to colleagues when they're not in the office, and maybe when we're not in the office. I think the challenge probably that I see is tech. So I don't think we should underestimate how important it will be to make sure that no colleague working from home feels disadvantaged that they're not in the office. And if I'm honest, we're still working that through. How will that work? I did my first board offsite a few weeks ago, and we had 2 of our board who unfortunately had to self-isolate, and it was really challenging. And I know they didn't feel as included within the conversation as maybe those of us that were in the sort of the very large meeting room, 2 meters socially distanced. It was a bit odd. So I think that's a big challenge. And I think the other thing is that leaders don't default back to the old habits, because ultimately I believe we have to role model it. And we have to recognise that if we're in the office, then there will be a pressure felt through the organisation to be in the office. And that includes things like training, development, mentoring, coaching. We've got to work hard to make sure that, particularly for younger colleagues, we're giving them the access to those that have maybe walked in their shoes, a few years before, or have different experiences. So I think it will require lots of energy and effort, but I think, the win is greater.
Thanks. Now I've got 2 questions here on the same theme. So if you bear with me, I'm trying to amalgamate both together. So we had a question that was sent in.
I'll have a sip of tea then.
Yeah, have a sip of tea, yes. So we know that it's been a really tough 18 months, I guess, now for charities and businesses alike. How has the pandemic affected Principality's ability to fundraise? I know that you have 2 charity partners, and we actually have a question from Stacey in the Q&A from the Teenage Cancer Trust and formerly the Alzheimer's Society. And she's saying that Principality has been one of the few businesses that has managed to continue to engage colleagues through fundraising and volunteering. And what advice would you give to other businesses who are maybe struggling to maintain their charity partnerships? And where do you see the future, I guess, of charity partnerships and whether they'll change? Sorry, there's a lot in that question.
You might feel free to come in at the end and say I didn't answer some of the question. Yeah, we very quickly realised the impact to charities and to our partners, and it's not just charities, but I think those were the immediate priorities for us. And what we decided to do, we do a matching principle whereby if colleagues fundraise, we will match. So what we decided to do was, in effect, we paid it forward. So we made a payment to the charities halfway through last year rather than wait to the end of the financial year. And that was just to kind of show that we were standing with them, that this was still really important to us, but fundamentally that for cash flow and for their continued investment, that hopefully this would make a difference as well. It has been difficult. So there's certain parts of our programme, I would say we have struggled more. For instance, financial education, we do a lot of work with schools where we will normally be going in and we will be running financial education lessons. We will be sitting, reading to, primary school children. We'll be talking to them about, not about Principality, but about money and what matters. And that certainly has been difficult. So we are going through a process of thinking, how can we do that? What we have done is launch some digital tools for schools, for teachers, for parents. So trying to bring some of those messages into a more digital sort of channel. And I think that's brilliant. And to be honest, we would have loved to have been doing that anyway. So it's created some capacity to do that and hopefully extend our reach and mean that we're impacting and having an effect on more people. But I think in terms of what have we practically done, we've still talked about the importance of charities. We did a 12 Days of Christmas campaign, which was about just small donations to local charities. We've tried to keep it top of mind. We've brought together well-being and charity into one. So we've done lots of steps challenges. I myself in June just scraped through 300,000 steps and did some fundraising for our 2 charities. And so many colleagues did that because we're all battling with a bit of bulge and a bit of sitting at our desk for too long. So, trying to sort of think creatively about how do we still keep this top of mind, link it to the other things that we're doing, and really get colleagues thinking about not only can I do some good for me and some time for me, but I can actually also do some really good work for charities. And obviously, as we've come out of lockdowns, we're promoting things like teams, getting together, maybe to do a beach clean or maybe to go to a community garden where they can still contribute and feel like they're giving back. To make sure that they're still socially distanced. And of course, teams are loving that opportunity to get together and have, a bit of time and space together to just catch up, really. So it is challenging. I think we've got more thinking to do. We've certainly loved working with the 2 charities over the last 3 years. And unfortunately, those come to an end at this calendar year, which is always really quite challenging. I was really proud to hear last week that we've now managed to be able to put a nurse into North Wales for Teenage Cancer Trust. And that, for me, that's been a goal. And just feeling like, how do we do more good? How do we utilise all of our colleagues and our customers to really help communities across Wales and the borders? That's something that we're thinking we do need to think push ourselves a little bit harder about how we have more impact. And that's certainly work that we're doing with our board at the moment. So more work to do, Larry, but yeah, really pleased and great to hear the feedback from Teenage Cancer Trust.
And what about any advice for other businesses who might be struggling to maintain these charity partnerships over this period? Yeah,
so I think, ask colleagues what they want to do, what will really help them get involved and want to do things. I think, too often we feel as managers or leaders, we've got to have all the answers. But I think, continuing to say to people, what's going to help you to want to do something in your spare time or, get involved in local and just, have that sort of conversation with people and see what your workforce and your colleagues are saying to you. I think that's really important. And also asking charities that you work with what really they need from you, because sometimes it's not just about money, it's about skills, it's about experiences. So if it's about, getting your company lawyer in to speak to, an organisation who maybe would benefit from that and save them money. So I think sometimes we focus very much on the fundraising part, which obviously is really important. but just thinking and asking your charity partners what they want from you, how you can help them, and to listen to them, I think they really value as well.
That's great advice. Thank you, Julie Ann. Another question from the Q&A. So this is from Joseph. Principality has clearly harnessed the value of renewed engagement with their people. And do you think it's important to build upon this beyond COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know more and more that when people are choosing who to work for, that there are some things that have really risen up the priority list in people's minds. So working for organizations with true purpose, where culture and value really mirror that purpose, and where people feel empowered and engaged on a daily basis. So, that's something that is an increasing trend that we're experiencing. And, I think it's really important that I recognize as a leader in my organization, at the top of the organization, the path and experience I've had to get to where I am will be completely different from people who are entering the workforce now. And so really trying to understand and connect with that is so important. There's obviously a lot of talk around ESG at the moment, and making sure that organizations are really focused on it. For me, as a mutual organization, the governance, has always been, something that we really, really celebrate. Because, as an example, for colleagues that have been with us through their probation, we'll give £100 into a savings account in order that they can become a member, and therefore they can vote as a colleague on all of the topics that our members can vote at our annual general meetings and the like. But I think, what I'm recognising is that we need to work a lot harder at that. So, we set up a colleague forum a couple of years ago. It's great. But actually what we're trying to do now is get that voice into our executive team on a much more frequent basis, get that voice up to our board, so that the real essence of what colleagues are experiencing and feeling and judging sometimes about our performance is heard and understood. So I think there's a massive opportunity, even though I think we're good at it. I think we should be really restless with ourselves as leaders about the potential that exists, and that sense of people come to work to do a good job, and quite often the system around them, and I don't mean tech, but the overall system, gets in the way and stops them achieving what they want to achieve, and ultimately their behaviours really are as a result of the system. And so just thinking very differently about our role as leaders and challenging ourselves on how we need to do better, I think for me is just one of my top priorities for the organisation.
Thanks. So that feeds nicely into the next question in the Q&A from Diego, who's asking about your ESG goals and prioritising them, and whether or not you use any frameworks like the Social Partnership Bill, UN Development Goals, and also how you coordinate with a broader economy, Wales, UK, Europe and beyond.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's an absolute active debate. So my executive team meeting next week, we're absolutely reviewing. I'm waiting to see the paper with what the proposal is from the team, but it will be to absolutely anchor to one of those frameworks. So I don't know the answer, I'm afraid, Diego, yet, but if I was here in a couple of weeks, I would be able to tell you. What we have done since becoming CEO is I've created an environmental lead across our organisation, which is working to make sure that through every aspect of our organisation, we're really, consciously taking steps to think about our footprint as an organisation, the footprint of our colleagues, and how we can educate them and inform them about the role that they need to play. And we've recently signed off an environmental strategy, which has some, challenging but ambitious goals in terms of being net zero by 2030. But I think Diego is absolutely getting to the heart of, we do need to consider what that framework is and make it easy for stakeholders to be able to understand how we're prioritising things, and more importantly, how we are measuring our progress, because I think that's absolutely crucial that we link through from the top of the organisation right way through, create that set of sustainable measures, provide transparency and visibility on progress, link that to remuneration, and ensure that there really is from top to bottom alignment on progress. So watch this space.
Thanks. Now, I'm going to ask Sarah to unmute herself, and she's got a question for you.
Yeah, thanks. As you know, Julie Ann, I specialise in improvement and lean and continuous improvement. And I think what's been really interesting for me working with some companies is that they've achieved things in the pandemic that would have taken them years to achieve. You know, it focused the mind, it got everyone moving in the one direction. So, you know, you're nodding there. So the same happened in Principality. And really, have you put anything in place to sort of reflect on how can we keep that going? How can we keep that momentum going? So, yeah, I was just interested to see how you were sort of learning from what happened and building it into your learning approach, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We all moved mountains. And if I'd said to my IT team, well, I mean, an interesting example after the Beast from the East, I was really frustrated that, for instance, we had our contact center had to close on the Saturday, for instance, of the weekend. And it was like, surely it's within our gift to enable colleagues to work from home and manage calls from home. And, I hit all of the barriers of why that wasn't possible. And lo and behold, a global pandemic, we managed to achieve that. So I think you're absolutely right. And that sense of bottling it is so important. For me, it's about empowerment. So ultimately, working virtually, leaders are a bit more out of the way and managers. And I think that's positive. It's back to what are leaders and managers there to do. And we're not close to the work. We don't know what the demand coming in is and what customers and colleagues need. And so I think in the pandemic, what we enabled was that the teams closest to the process, to the demand, to the work, could really say, right, what is required here? What do we have to do from a regulatory perspective? What do we want to do to be able to meet that demand? And everything else, really, why are we doing it? So that is really, I mean, we've got a long way to go within Principality. I think we've come on hugely over the past, 4 years from an empowerment perspective, but I don't underestimate that we've still got a way to go. We're a very traditional financial services organization. I've worked for global businesses, and on occasion I can feel like, God, it was easier when I was speaking to people in 6 countries with 6 languages, agreeing what time zone we were going to speak into. And so that for me is what sort of drives me forward, Sarah. I mean, I'm spending a day and a half a week on the principles of Lean Six Sigma and my role as a CEO and how I impact the system. And that's been a very deliberate step to really make sure that
a day and a half a week. That's amazing.
A day and a half a week for 8 weeks. Yeah. So that my afternoon today is doing that. And it's the unintended consequences of leadership. I've been brought up in a world where we add value. Our experience, of course, is so insightful, but it's experience based on a set of facts. They may not be the right facts. So yeah, that we're absolutely bottling it, I suppose, Sarah, to get to the point of the question. But we're not there yet. We've got a way to go.
Brilliant, thank you. A question from Roger from Cardiff Third Sector Council, and he's apologising for his long question, so bear with me. How do you see both your current and future recruitment needs and skills requirements and representation from communities that Principality serves in Wales and the borders?
Yeah, so it's a great question because there's kind of 2 big impacts here. One, which is the fact that we've got kind of remote or hybrid working, and one, which is organisationally, we've really got to accelerate our approach towards recruiting and retaining a more diverse, colleague base that more reflect the communities that we serve. So those kind of are 2 quite interesting opportunities, I think. I mean, clearly there are advantages in that. In the past, how did we entice people from London to maybe, if people were from Wales and they wanted to come back to Wales, then that was a great opportunity for us to recruit people back. But ultimately, if somebody wanted to still stay in London, they felt they were leaving, the sort of, the centre of some of the sort of the areas, and that maybe made it hard to always attract people. But I mean, I think we have absolutely cracked that over the last 12 months. I bumped into somebody last week who had met a member of their team for the first time, who's living in Sheffield. So he's living in Sheffield. He's doing a brilliant job for us. He's going to pop down once every X number of weeks when he can to engage with the team. I did an induction session with new starters. I had a colleague from Belfast. My chief people officer lives at the moment in Lytham in Lancashire. So that's meant that the pool of candidates is significantly bigger than maybe in the past we'd have been insisting that people move to Cardiff. And so that's exciting. Of course, that gives a challenge because we've got amazing talent in our organisation. Of course, that means that the market is more fluid the other way. So, I'm very conscious of that as well. I think in terms of skills for the future, so it is about partnering with, schools, with universities, apprenticeships. It's about identifying, there will be, more data, more sort of AI skills, digital skills, some of the sort of the risk management lens veering much more to that. Yeah, we still need people who've worked in underwriting and all of these areas, but actually they also need to be able to think about the broader base of skills. So what we're doing is a kind of multi-pronged approach, really. As I say, some of the things I've talked about. We're also partnering with FinTech Wales to really think about the sort of technology space. That's a very hot market in Cardiff and the surrounding areas. So what can we do to create opportunities where, for instance, if it's a scheme where individuals will move around different organisations, we're doing some of that now through the Financial Services Graduate Scheme. But actually, how do we really supercharge that? And don't just look for graduates, but be thinking much more about social mobility, about thinking about attracting directly from schools and really bringing people through different organisations. And really just changing our mindset so that we're creating the longest possible list of candidate names rather than being overly specific on what's required for the role. So trying to create space for people to read a job description and think, yeah, I could do that. Rather than in the past, probably we've been very, specific about the things that we want. And then partnering with other organisations who are really good in this space. So specific recruitment consultants who maybe have very strong networks, developing talent pipelines before you need the talent. That's also some of the things we're doing. So it's a multi-pronged attack, and it's again front and center really of us becoming more relevant as an organisation. So it's pretty mission critical for our long-term success that we can recruit and retain those the right skills for the future.
So another related question about the diversity of your workforce. So Amanda Davis is saying that she's loved hearing about how the culture at Principality is developing, and is diversity and increasing that, improving diversity, is that something on your agenda? And do you have any advice for any other organisations going down this route?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. I would have loved it if nobody mentioned the fact that I was the first female in 160 years to be Principality's first CEO. That was something I didn't put in. We didn't put that into the press release, but of course that was the angle that people pick up on. And I understand that, and I understand that I have a responsibility to role model and show that it is possible, and that, that by doing that maybe enables others to see that it is possible for them. But wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where that wasn't unusual? And actually, wouldn't it be even better if I was from a minority ethnic background? Because I think at the end of the day, gender parity is so much closer to us being able to achieve that. There are many other groups who sadly still don't get represented in my senior team. So we are focused on it. We are making progress, but it's slow, if I'm really honest. So we've sort of put a foot on the ball at the moment, and we're really challenging ourselves on: have we been ambitious enough? Have we really grasped where the bias in our processes and in our thinking are. And it is a bit of a work in progress. But I think in terms of, if I look at my own recruitment, I put in place a new executive structure when I took over in September. And I think I have created a more diverse group of individuals around my table, sadly all white, but certainly in thinking style, certainly in background, certainly in terms of social mobility, there is much more diversity and of course gender as well, but an awful lot more to do. So what's required? I think talking about it. I think doing an awful lot of listening. So I talked earlier about our colleague forum, networks as well. So I organised a day with our internal comms team for all of our networks to come in and spend a day with the exec team talking about their challenges, their achievements, and what was stopping progress. And there were some obvious easy wins of things we could do to support them better, but there was also some things that you thought, they're demanding more of us as leaders, and we need to listen to that. So I think listening is so important, because I think we'll genuinely then hear what the blocks truly are, rather than what we think the blocks are. And I think recruitment is important, but it's also about retention, and being seen to visibly back talent, and back talent of people who maybe don't think that that's within their gift. So continual focus really on that as we move forward. So make it a boardroom conversation, make it something that the executive team feel that they are responsible for. I'm minded to put it into measures for next year, because I think whilst we do have measures, it's a company-wide thing, and it's about creating the individual pool, listening to colleagues and hearing what the blocks and the barriers are. And then just communicating when you have those wins, communicate a factor of 10 really around when you have those successes, why we're proud of them and the difference that they're making. And I genuinely feel now what I'm hearing is my senior leadership team are noticing the difference in having a more diverse executive team. So if that can permeate through the organisation, and the next layer are then thinking about the same as they look around their leadership tables, then we will be able to make a real difference.
You've mentioned earlier about how the system of the organisation sometimes gets in the way of your colleagues doing their best work. So how have you worked on the system and to make improvements to it? And thanks to David for that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we started probably 6 years ago, and I guess when I first met Sarah, it was to do with us sharing our approach to this. And so we invested in a team and created a bit of a proprietary approach to systems thinking, which sort of took the best of manufacturing but applied it in a more service-oriented industry. And what we did was a huge number of sort of interventions, I call them, functional interventions. So, for instance, we looked at the whole account opening process, or the whole onboarding of a broker, or the opening of the application for a mortgage. And we again empowered the team to collect the data, to really think through what was happening, what was value, what was waste, where were all the loops of work, what really added value, what was the regulatory must-dos, what were the things that in our heads we thought were regulatory, but really in talking to our compliance teams, challenge ourselves, is that really what we need to do? And why does competitor X not do that if it is regulatory? So what makes us different? What's the assumptions behind that? And that drove a significant number of benefits, both in terms of cost saving, where we were able to grow our business without having to put additional headcount in. And it also delivered, improvements in colleague morale and customer, net promoter score. So over the past 7 years, our net promoter score has probably gone from mid-60s up to 81 as it is currently. Those have been very deliberate interventions across customer-facing teams. We then probably 3 years ago started to look at some of our what you call support functions. So our approach to 3 lines of defence in terms of compliance or financial crime. Who was doing what, why were we doing it, what value was being created by the work that was being done, and the same with data reporting. So we've taken are reasonably sort of identified all the sort of the value within the organization, and then really taken that approach. And the piece that I mentioned earlier was recognizing, though, there are certain things that are so hardwired into the system of the organization that functionally you never really get to them, which is why we've sort of embarked on this much more what I call enterprise-wide approach. And that's the piece what I was referring to about my sort of inculcation into this over the last, and over the next few weeks. And that's really about saying that as a leader, what are the assumptions and conditions that we're putting into the organization? And are those adding value, and how do we utilize the fact base and the data to really identify where we can create more value, be more efficient and effective, and most importantly, be able to then invest in growth, invest in innovation, pick up pace and agility, because all of that waste drives complexity in our business, and it stops us achieving the things which are much more in my agenda as the CEO. So how will we be much more relevant in the future from an organizational perspective? How do we grow our business much more sustainably across both, not just Wales, but the UK? How can I ensure that I'm doing a better job of delivering my purpose, and really helping people to prosper in their homes? Ultimately, that's, where growth and prosperity comes for the organization. But going through this process and really challenging ourselves on how we deliver both the efficiency and the effectiveness, and really the agility that's required, while still being safe, that's the ultimate prize, really, because what I want to do is get our organisation much more focused on growth and potential and opportunity, because I see huge potential for our organisation to do much more.
Now, we've got 2 questions left in the Q&A. I'm going to try and squeeze them into the time that we've got left. So the first one is about cyber security and whether this has risen on your risk register, and how do you balance the human versus the technology risks of cyber?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I mean, clearly it's been in our top 10 risk register for a number of years. We've invested quite significantly over the past 4 years, probably, in terms of our systems and our controls, developing our capabilities of our team, ensuring we've got the right resource focused on the right areas. And it is a balance. I think it's helpful being a member-based organisation, because what we try to do is tell the stories about, the most basic thing we do is to look after people's life savings. What can be a £2,000 to one person or £250,000 to another? If we're ultimately holding that money, then the thing they demand of us is that we are a safe and secure organisation. So what we've done is expanded out what that safe and secure means, which is, it is about their money, but it is about their data, and it is about ensuring that we are aware of the risks and helping and supporting members to be more aware themselves. So I think what we've tried to do is almost link it back to why we're here, why we exist, in order that colleagues are maybe a little bit more forgiving about some of the improvements in systems and controls that they maybe have to abide by, and recognise that that there is a tension. And again, utilising benchmark, we very much then understand how are we benchmarking against others in terms of our systems and controls. Where are others moving that could really help us in this area? Or actually are there areas where we're already advanced? And, really proud of the work that the teams have done in the last few years to get us to, what I hope is a reasonably safe position. But, we should never be complacent. The threat is changing all the time. And so we need to be really proactive. And making it a boardroom conversation, I think, is really, really important as well, so that our board fully understand what's required of us and why we need to invest in this area, and getting then customer feedback on how that feels, and balancing that and bringing that in then enables the board to take that holistic view around risk appetite, which ultimately is the part that they play.
Okay, so the last question, and you've touched on this at the beginning of our discussion, with everyone having worked from home for what feels like a very long time now, has Principality introduced some initiatives to try and bring colleagues together in a more social way for their well-being and other reasons? Yeah,
so I mentioned earlier, we we're definitely encouraging the beach cleans, the community. So to do it with purpose, where it's very much an opportunity to get together, but actually have some fun and make a difference. We also at Christmas, for instance, I mean, I've been very blessed with our internal comms team. They're very creative and come up with some fantastic ideas. So what we did is we did allow colleagues, we don't normally do like a Christmas party where the company funds the Christmas party, but what we did do is we gave everybody an allowance for them to use as they wanted to as a team. And fortunately, it was in the period where we were allowed to socialise in small groups, and that was massively valued, where people could get together, decide what they wanted to do. So if I was in a branch, it might just have been about having some food in the branch after the doors being closed, being able to to stay in the branch. It could have been about a small group getting together. We encourage walking one-to-ones, walking outdoor team meetings, anything outdoor when the rules allow, really. So again, just trying, and I will talk and hopefully, and what I see my exec team do is also talk about the things that they are doing to encourage people to do it. We're absolutely talking about, my ambition is to try and do a sort of conference in the end of quarter 3. And it would just be awesome to be able to do that, all of us together somewhere. I don't know where, but that would absolutely be the space. So more work to do, but really proud of the things that the team have come up with so far.
Well, fingers crossed you might be able to make that happen later on in the year. So thank you hugely, Julie Ann. It's been so fantastic to hear from you. So thank you very much for your time and for answering everybody's questions. So I'm going to hand back to John now. Yeah,
can I just echo that, Larry? Julie Ann, that's been, the hour has just flown by this morning. You promised us a fortnight ago when we spoke that there was, I think you said nothing is off limits in terms of questions. And to be fair, you've answered so comprehensively and thoroughly and honestly this morning. It's been so refreshing. So thank you so much for sparing your time to join us this morning. Larry, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you for managing the Q&As for me. That's really grateful for that. And to you as an audience, those of you who've posed questions this morning, those of you who've joined us, thank you so much as well. Our season of breakfast briefings is coming to a close. We're going to take August off, so the next briefing won't be until September. We've run 12 briefings during the course of the past 12 months or so, since last September, and we've had around 2,000 registrations. So we really hope that we're bringing you topics of interest to you and keeping our community together. But if you do have any ideas, I know we said that we have briefings lined up into the autumn, but if you do have any ideas of topics that you think may be of interest, then please do contact us so that we can have a discussion. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am fod efo ni bore yma. Gobeithio'n fawr fyddwn ni'n gweld chi eto yn yr Hydref. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you again in the autumn. Please, I hope you have a great summer break if you're able to do so. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Diolch yn fawr iawn.